Please welcome to the show America's accountant, Dan Geltrude, coming to us from Nutley, New Jersey. Dan, thanks for being on. Okay, you can look up the percentages yourself, but it's minimal. Nobody's really expecting anything for this meeting. I might make the argument that the longer these meetings go by and we keep getting GDP numbers or other numbers like we've been getting over the last week or two, we might not see what everybody wants in March either.
Well, I'm not exactly sure when the Fed will do it, but I believe it's very likely that we are going to have interest rate cuts going into 2024. Now, whether that hits in March, April, or beyond, it's really anyone's guess. Everybody's kind of betting on which way it'll go. But there's a couple things that are clear. Obviously, as you mentioned, the investment community and Wall Street is not just counting on it, they're relying on it. And you could see the way the numbers are flowing on Wall Street, that's getting baked into the numbers. Now, just because they want it, that may not be enough. But there's this other outside factor that I think is going to play into it, and it's an election year. I think there's going to be enormous pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates because they're looking to spur the economy so that all the incumbents can point to either a strong or at least an improving economy. And I think that's going to be part of the play here, Scott.
But isn't the negative part of that plan inflation?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that they figure they could hold it off long enough because people have become so numb to inflation, Scott, as you said before, right? We still have inflation. It's still there. It's just not as much as it had been. So because inflation is slowing, that's going to be the basis for the rate cuts.
So, it's a little disappointing to hear you say that you think that they're politicized, but I'm not surprised, okay? It's happened before, and it will happen again. But the mere fact that they're still looking at a 2% mandate, we're at 3.4% today, and they feel as though that they need to cut. I mean, look, I'll say it 1,000 times. I understand why they wanted to raise rates in the first place to kind of try to cool inflation, and they've, to some degree, you could say that that's been done, right? But once you get that job done, I would argue you sit there and keep rates where they are. Because if you go back 50 years, the average of the Fed funds rate between now and 1971 is 5.42%. We're right there. Why would you start cutting once you got the job done? You're just going to get back into the problem you just left, right?
Well, I think that we are in a society, or it's just the times where everyone wants instant gratification. It's all about today. It's not about long-term benefit. So that's why I think you're gonna see that. Now, listen, Scott, look at those GDP numbers, right? Exceeded expectations. They were rather strong. And you can look at that and say, well, hey, wait a minute, do we need to cut or not cut? But you have to look at what's behind that. I believe that GDP is being fueled with personal debt. You have, all the programs related to COVID over, so you don't have that free money floating around. And then you also have a situation where, what is it that I want to say? No free money, and people are spending their savings, and they're using credit cards. So is that GDP number really real growth? Well, it's debt-fueled.
Yeah, by both the consumer and the government. I think they're both in that debt-fueled game. I mean, the government's responsible for around 56,000 jobs per month last year, almost over 600,000 in total. That's a large part of the growth as well. It's been fueled by government spending, and we're not even getting a bang for the buck. For every $1.55 we spend from the government's point of view, we only get $1 worth of GDP. So that's not very good either. And to your point about you're only as good as what you've done for me lately, or you're only as good as your last at bat, I think that I'm hindered with my mindset because I come from an age group where, for instance, at the University of Colorado, my freshman year, we were 1-10, okay? And at the end of that year, our head coach, who's now in the College Football Hall of Fame, got a 5-year extension and a big raise after going 1-10. And at the end of that 5-year extension, he won the national championship. What do you think the odds are today? A guy goes 1-10, gets a 5-year extension, and gets a big raise. How about zero?
Zero.
Right.
It's zero.
And so to your point, there's no patience anymore. How do you build something? That's why I also give some CEOs on Wall Street they got a difficult job because every quarter they have to report. It has to be better, or they're in trouble. And that's not a great situation to be in either.
No, listen, we're no longer a patient society. We're no longer a long-term vision society. And it is reflected in government. Look, when you look at we're competing with China, China looks at things in terms of decades, right? We look in terms of annually. Why? Because there's an election every year. And that's what drives all the decisions that come out of every level of government, Scott.
And when you have to make decisions that are only short-term based, a lot of times they aren't very good decisions because you can't give yourself a chance to build something for the future, right? And whether that may be CEOs or that may be coaches, sports, and the likes, in order to get something going for a long time, you have to make some painful early decisions that might not show any fruits until maybe second or third year down the road. But I don't know if Wall Street's got the patience for that, because the American public definitely does not.
No, they do not, and we see that. And look, there's no more obvious example of this of looking at the national debt. The only reason that we are in the mess we're in financially is because politicians are buying votes.
Exactly
and
right.
And that's what's behind that.
100%. Thank you very much, Dan Geltrude. Great to see you on a Monday. Dan's coming to us from Nutley, New Jersey. Thanks for taking the time to be on the show.